Our war in Gaza has changed the world. The impacts of this war have reverberated across the globe. I don't think we can overstate how much the region and how much the world will be changed after these last 2 years. Thank you very much. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East. But deep scars are not easily healed. The Middle East has already been reshaped by a chain of events set off on October 7, 2023. How October 7, 2023 set off a domino effect in the Middle East. In its unprecedented attack on Israel, Hamas killed around 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and took another 251 hostage. It's important to remember that that was the largest attack on Israel ever experienced effectively, and I believe it shattered assumptions that Israel's security was unshakable. Israel controls Gaza's airspace, its shoreline, and the shared border. Since 1967, Palestine, comprising of Gaza and the West Bank, has been recognized by the UN as occupied by Israel. Israel saw the 7 October attack as a threat to its existence. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the Israeli response would change the Middle East. October 7th certainly set off a sort of domino effect in the region. While Israel responded with airstrikes on Gaza, armed groups allied to Hamas launched their own attacks on Israel. Iran's axis of resistance against Israel, these came from Hezbollah in Lebanon and from the Houthis in Yemen. All three groups are part of Iran's self-styled axis of resistance, a network of proxy forces which challenge its enemy, Israel. Israel had been living with this ring of fire, with these Iranian proxies, and trying to deter them. After October 7th, the Israelis decided deterrence doesn't work. The Israeli army's offensive in Gaza, Israeli forces entered Gaza with the stated aim of rescuing the hostages and destroying Hamas. In the first 3 months, the offensive, more than 20,000 people were killed in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, whose figures are seen by the UN as reliable. The military offensive continued, along with rocket fire exchanges with Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah. Israel's military offensive on Hezbollah in Lebanon. Then in Lebanon, almost a year into the war, Israel triggered a sleeper weapon, thousands of booby-trapped pagers, and walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah members exploded. They had secretly been sabotaged by Israel. The walkie-talkie attack certainly took the world by surprise. To have this extremely personalized type of targeting was, I think, something that made a huge impact and really rattled Hezbollah and made it very difficult for them to recoup and recover after that. By killing Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah in an airstrike on Lebanon's capital days later, Israel ensured that the strongest part of Iran's axis of resistance was crippled, the toppling of Bashar al-Assad by rebels in Syria. Rebels in neighboring Syria then launched an offensive against Hezbollah's ally, the country's dictator Bashar al-Assad. Syria lost one of its major backers with the fall of Hezbollah, and likewise the fall of Hezbollah weakened Iran, which was also a major patron for the Assad regime, and suddenly a regime that had always been rather fragile and shaky didn't have the actors around it to prop it up anymore. After 24 years in power, Assad was toppled, with impacts beyond Syria. Turkey, which had backed rebel groups in Syria, saw its influence rise, while Russia, a longtime supporter of Assad and another of Iran's allies, lost its foothold in the region, and the balance of power was to shift even further from Iran. Israel and Iran had been going at each other through proxies and indirectly and covert action for years and years, but neither had ever struck the other directly. Israel and US strike Iran's nuclear facilities in 12-day war. That changed with repeated strikes by Israel and Iran on each other's territory. And in June 2025, Israel attacked Iran's nuclear facilities. Days later, Donald Trump would make an intervention which shocked the world, as America joined Israel in the strikes. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. The extent of the damage to Iran's nuclear program remains unclear, but it halted the 12th-day war between Iran and Israel and sent a strong signal about America being a global power that's willing to intervene. Pre-October 7th, I think there really was a sense that the US was maybe pivoting away from the Middle East, that it was leaving the Middle East open to other actors, China most prominently, also Russia, to have a bigger footprint in the region. But certainly October 7th, the Gaza war and everything happening regionally has pulled the US focus back to the Middle East. Accusations of famine and genocide against Israel. As the conflict continued, a UN-backed body concluded that there was famine in Gaza City and surrounding areas. A separate UN Commission of Inquiry said Israel had committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, and nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people and the systematic destruction of Gaza. Israel described the confirmation of famine as an outright lie and denounced the report on genocide as distorted and false. Israel is accused of deliberately targeting civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposite is true: recognition of a Palestinian state, but mounting anger over Israel's military campaign and major shifts in public opinion led more countries to join the majority recognizing a Palestinian state. That included the UK and France, both permanent members of the UN Security Council, formally recognizes the state of Palestine. Of course, there will be many who say it is just symbolic, but I think symbols still matter, largely because those states were willing to make that move. That made it easier for Arab states, for other states in the region to push Hamas towards a ceasefire, and to say Hamas also needs to finish this Israel-Hamas ceasefire brokered by Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey. The Gulf state of Qatar has been a key mediator seeking to end the war. Hamas's political leadership is based there, and Qatar is also a key ally of the US, hosting America's largest military base in the Middle East. So when Israel hits Hamas's headquarters in Qatar's capital Doha, there were fears the peace process would be derailed, but the opposite happened. I think that the Israeli attack on Doha was a turning point in bringing the war to an end. Donald Trump told Benjamin Netanyahu the war had to stop. Hamas was under intense pressure too, threatened by the US president with complete obliteration. Diplomatic efforts for a ceasefire intensified, led by the US and Qatar, along with Egypt and Turkey, which both had geographic or diplomatic influence over the conflict. The role of regional actors cannot be understated. Qatar, as well as Egypt and Turkey, were very instrumental in getting Hamas to be willing to negotiate and to be willing to take the Trump proposal seriously. Thank you very much. A ceasefire and hostage prisoner exchange was agreed between Israel and Hamas. It marked a milestone in a conflict that has strengthened Israel's reputation after 2 years of war in Gaza, Israel's security position, but has had repercussions for its reputation. A consequence of its militaristic approach is the blowback Israel has experienced internationally and regionally, where Israel is more isolated today than it has been in decades. The issuing of arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over alleged war crimes in Gaza have been a major blow to Israel's international standing. Mr. Netanyahu called the International Criminal Court's decision anti-Semitic. A warrant was also issued for the Hamas military chief, Mohammed Daif, although he had been killed in an airstrike in Gaza. I think that this conflict has also brought renewed attention to international law. I know many feel a lot of cynicism around international law for not being able to stop the atrocities that they were seeing happening in Gaza. The long-term impacts of the Israel-Hamas conflict. At least 68,000 people have been killed by Israeli attacks in Gaza. The October 7th, 2023 is a day which casts a long shadow in Israel and across the Middle East. The trauma of these past 2 years will certainly be carried forward across society and within families that have experienced such profound loss. For people in the region, their lives will never be the same.